Hi and welcome to SHOWstudio's live London Fashion Week Roundup. I'm Hetty Mahlich and I'm joined by our lovely content editor, Calum Knight.
Hello.
So we've just had 6 days of a rather strange but actually quite wonderful and exciting London Fashion Week. Most of the shows have gone digital apart from a couple of physical activations. Just before we kicked off with the return of Gareth Pugh to the schedule, he's kind of a mainstay of London Fashion Week, so that was a really exciting moment, and he did a project with Nick Knight which you can find over on SHOWstudio.com. So, kicking off, I think we're going to talk about fashion film. This is a medium that has been around for a while, but a lot of designers haven't really made the foray into it, and I think this season the majority of the schedule decided to tackle it for the first time. And I think our kind of 3 highlights were Halpern, Bianca Saunders and Richard Malone.
Yeah, I mean, and actually I think it's really good, this moment, this kind of 20 minutes that we have is a really good time to actually also study unpack what it means to do a fashion film, because it totally changes the designer's schedule, totally kind of hands the last element over of a collection to another creative's view. So it's an incredibly stressful thing for a designer to do, but it's paid off so well. So yeah, as you said, we want to highlight these 3 brands. Halpern, who worked with 9 key workers throughout the pandemic to create these gorgeous, luscious, kind of couture level gowns, all handcrafted.
And Michael was saying actually that he was terrified of fashion film at the beginning and didn't even realise what went into it until he was doing it. But said actually coming out the other side, he definitely wants to keep exploring it.
And I think that's one of the things, all the designers I'm speaking to who are trying this are kind of discovering that it's actually such a joy to work in a different way. And I think we'll see kind of going on, kind of looking further over the horizon to hopefully a time when we can all gather in rooms and, you know, have shows again, that actually designers will have a lot more of a choice and won't be penalised, which is what was happening. You know, magazines, different platforms weren't set up to support fashion film, to support live until this pandemic, and they changed all their back ends to do so. So before, if you chose to do this, you were cutting out your coverage. So people were basically held ransom to the fashion show for the last however long.
Yeah, and I think it feeds into the whole narrative of everyone feeling like this moment has allowed them to kind of step off the hamster wheel. And I think this fashion film is definitely a key part in the future designers either doing a show or doing something like a film, but whatever kind of suits them and their brand in that moment. And I think this moment has definitely opened the door on allowing designers to do that, and I think that's particularly important for young designers who often get caught up in this kind of thing of suddenly getting stockists and then they suddenly get caught away with themselves and run out of money and have to close.
I mean, yeah, I mean, to be honest, to do a fashion show as kind of anyone would ever think of a fashion show, the most basic kind, white wall, couple of seats, some lighting, that's immediately going to cost you around £40,000. So just immediately just having that decision or being forced into that decision of having a seasonal fashion show, you're already £40,000 down, and as a young business starting out in trying times, it's an incredibly big output. So yeah, so super exciting that fashion film's being accepted. Bianca Saunders also, I think, had an amazing film. Really,
really beautiful. Bianca is a menswear designer, and she this season was really inspired by Hans Eichelboom, his work Ideal Man from 1978. I actually saw this at the Masculinities exhibition at the Barbican, and I have a feeling that maybe Bianca saw it there as well. Basically, he went round and asked women who their ideal man was and then dressed up and took self-portraits. And Bianca's done this beautiful film called The Ideal Man, and there's different tropes and the men kind of, and boys and whoever kind of act these out. And it's a really lovely kind of poetic development of narrative, both in the film and in the clothes that Bianca's designed this season.
Because I think it's really important to say about Bianca's film is that she actually didn't design the collection with this presentation in mind, but then added this additional narrative on for the film, but it benefits the clothes so much that the viewer can start to interplay and interweave their own narratives within, and it's just it's an extra layer, it's an extra texture to each collection. But there weren't only fashion films, there were a few shows, the biggest obviously being Burberry, collaborating with Anne Imhoff. No audience there, but kind of a half-an-hour live stream extravaganza.
You kicked off the schedule on Thursday, it was live streamed as Cal said, and we had these kind of performers who Anne Heemhoff had choreographed in this kind of circular pit in the middle, and the models gradually, we followed them walking through the woods, kind of flanked by security guards, and eventually they all lined up on individual plinths around this performance. And it was also a really exciting moment because we kind of felt that this was really Riccardo merging with Burberry really well for the first time. So kind of on all aspects, all round, it was a real exciting moment.
Another lot smaller affair, but still as impactful, was the FARZANEH show, which was a long way to get to. I think all in all it took us 5 hours to get back to the office after leaving our houses, but that is fine. We all ended up in a field, kind of Amersham?
Yeah, Amersham.
Outside of London, to witness a kind of, I don't want to say a call to arms, but a call to action from Paria, starting with kind of 2 firework displays fighting each other, and then these models kind of coming out of this smoke into this new world that she was designing for them. Yeah,
it was really lovely. We were kind of sitting in the grass, and then eventually the models kind of came up towards us and walked through the crowd. A more kind of forceful approach for Paria, and that definitely came through in the show, and it was, being one of the only physical shows on the schedule, it was a very kind of dramatic moment, and one that I think people will remember.
But this is what I think is so important, is that Paria had something to say this season, so needed that show and found a way to do that, but it shouldn't be expected that every season she needs to say something physical. So I think this is a great example of when, and the same with Riccardo at Burberry, when you have your moment to say something, you should totally be allowed and celebrated for saying it, but it shouldn't be expected upon these creatives.
And I think especially for Paria, it was, as you said, it took us a lot of time to get in and out of London to go there, and that she never would have set that up if we hadn't been in the current moment that we are. So I think it was really lovely because it was produced and put on with this moment in mind, and that's what it was.
Exactly. I mean, we also had Molly, who was planning to do a small salon presentation, but actually that was scuppered by the rule of 6. But I actually think seeing her collection on video and knowing what we know about it now, that kind of works, the fact that no one was there. You know, we have the clothes themselves, as per classic Molly, huge explosions of tulle, we have an UGG collaboration, super colourful, lots of clashes, which is apparently the exact opposite of what the collection was supposed to be, but she just couldn't keep away from colour.
Yeah.
But actually, to start with, she looked at really minimal sculptures, which you don't see in the clothes, but you see in the setting, and I think being removed from that and seeing that as one, the set and the clothes, really benefits them.
I agree, especially Molly, she works with her mum, who's a set designer, who does all the sets of her shows, and they're always very kind of immersive and extravagant. Kind of at one show, I remember everyone was sitting at kind of dining tables, another was a life drawing class. So this was completely the opposite, and I think it really benefited the collection, especially because it was about pure colour, volume, materials, and the focus was on that, and I thought it actually really worked.
And then the kind of final way that people showed physically was actually Per Gotson, who invited people individually to come to this, it sounds really creepy, but it wasn't, this room in East London where we sat at the end of a dining room table, Hetty and I, and we had Per on one side of us, and his studio assistants, I believe, one was a student and one was a studio assistant, came out and modelled the collection they'd been working on over lockdown as Per narrated them to us, and we could stand up and we could look at things and we could, you know, ask them to turn around. And it was kind of this weird meeting of a fashion show, kind of hanging out with your friend, and also, you know, a presentation, kind of an old couture style presentation that works so well. And
I think that's definitely something which people have been saying this season, is that they've been enjoying doing these appointments and working in a different way, where I think the show will definitely come back in some way, and you can't beat that atmosphere, but there's something to be said for not just quickly rushing backstage saying hi and bye, and actually engaging with these clothes in a different way. Like we were saying about Pair yesterday, engaging with the collection in that way was just such a rarity that you usually don't get to do until a few months later, and it was really like exciting and special and felt really right for now.
But I also was thinking about this literally just now, that we're really privileged to be able to do that, but the industry still needs to find a way to amplify that, because the amount of Per fans or people who might even just be interested in fashion would love to have that experience, and that could have been live streamed, and I think that's kind of fashion's next frontier, is actually to speak directly to the audience.
Definitely. I mean, Christopher Kane was saying that. I went to see him the other morning, and he is opening up his Mount Street store to the public for about a week or so that you can come and see the collection. It's all inspired by paintings that he's done, and each outfit is next to the painting. And I think he was saying, you know, we need to open the door to the public and make it more of a dialogue, because that's like, this is a really great opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I mean, London's spoken for so long about being so open, but it's still within the hands of 100 of us. I mean, I still saw the same 100 people that I've seen for the last 4 years, and I love seeing them, but you know, there's so many people that are interested in this, so I think that is kind of the next thing. I'm glad you brought up Christopher Kane, because he was one of the people who, as you said, kind of stopped the hamster wheel, had this time off to think. He painted, which ended up being his collection in the end. But there were a few other people that we really felt really refined what they were doing, had time to think. Robyn Lynch being one of them, kind of a lot smaller scale, but still managed to, through the introduction of women's wear as well, actually really managed to find all the tropes that we love in Robyn and just refine those and distill those. Yeah,
she's a really great menswear designer, and her kind of her recognisable kind of trope is she kind of splices together kind of heritage fabrics with more kind of retro sportswear fabrics, and this season she really refined it down, and she had great kind of windbreakers, and kind of then with like a massive panel of kind of Aran knit in this great kind of lifeguard orange. And as you said, then introduce women's wear. I'm really excited to see where she takes that. I think we've definitely had designers this season refining their kind of DNA, but then also giving a nod to what they're going to do in the future, which is really exciting.
We had the same thing with Bethany. Obviously, one of the pressures of not having a catwalk is that you can actually produce a lot smaller collections. Bethany's collection was about 10 looks with some extra pieces, and also some children's wear, which was so lovely.
Really nice.
But again, just having that pressure taken off has allowed Bethany to make those 10 looks the most Bethany, the most exciting, the most apt for this time. And because obviously if you're doing a runway show, you think, oh, I've got to keep them going, but actually in an appointment we didn't need to see more than what we got. We got just the right amount to understand where she was at, to understand all the techniques she'd been looking at, all the people she'd been working with. And that was enough. Again, just a bit of control and less excess.
I know, I agree, and I think especially with someone like Bethany, where the background to the collection is so important. It's not, I mean, it's not, the clothes can still speak so strongly on their own, but I think knowing that narrative and what charity she's worked with each season is so important, and I think that, again, is something that people want from brands, is they want to engage with the designer more in this way and with the clothes. And then we also had Simone Rocha, which I thought was she was saying that this season she really wanted to look to kind of what do we stand for and what's important now and what makes us feel safe and secure. And I think this collection really did that. It was really pure Simone Rocha. We had kind of her gorgeous kind of bulbous, amazing tufted dresses and rich embroidery and this lots of pearl work and this amazing kind of pearl bag, which is kind of going around everywhere. And I thought it was just really strong, beautiful Simone.
And I think she'd been really inspired by the way that her team, who I believe is all female, had worked through this. So this was really an ode to them and felt very, very personal, but not to the point where we couldn't interact with it. But it felt like a very personal collection. Had, you know, lots of plays around the ideas of kind of representation of feminine forms and, you know, large bulbous shapes around the hips to really exaggerate, very sculpted actually, which is something she hasn't done for a while. But again, this felt quintessentially Simone, but just with an update to make it right for the times.
Yeah.
Sadly, not everyone hit the mark as well, whilst London was very strong this season.
Yeah, so I felt underwhelmed by Vivienne Westwood. I think there was some really great tailoring in there, which Vivienne does so well, but I think it got lost in a lot of print, which it was kind of this Aztec-y print, and I wasn't really sure where it came from and where it fit into the Vivienne brand. She worked with quite a lot of incredible people for the campaign, but I felt like their voices, she kind of missed an opportunity to bring their voices in.
I think that actually really is what happened. Everyone's clothes were lovely, but there were lots of missed opportunities in London, and I really thought with Vivienne, with the political situation we are in now, would be leading this moment. She has been so vocal from the beginning of her career, and there was one slogan t-shirt that said "True Punk," but I just didn't. I mean, she's been protesting the whole of lockdown. She's been so vocal. So it looks like it just didn't really fit with the Vivienne I've seen. She's been doing weekly broadcasts on Instagram about the state of the world.
And also that's what you usually expect from Vivienne on when she shows in London. I mean, Spring Summer 20, her campaign was her literally doing a political speech with models surrounding her with banners and stuff. So I was completely expecting that again, especially in this current moment.
Well, I mean, luckily we have the Andrea show, which obviously is Andrea's for Vivienne, but maybe that will come out then. But I did just think, oh, the Vivienne show is going to be where we all get told how it's going to be. Do you know what I mean? She was going to lay down the law.
Yeah.
Also with Victoria Beckham, there was some really great day wear, which felt quite apt, I was saying, for the Victoria Beckham women to be wearing, you know, on their Zoom calls and still trying to, you know, and it really made sense. But there was also a lot of evening wear, which really didn't seem to fit with the story she was trying to tell of this kind of reality, was it a dream inspired by reality? It wasn't too dreamy and it wasn't too real either. It missed the mark. Yeah,
it stood somewhere too in the middle, and I didn't feel convinced by the kind of Victoria Beckham woman, and she usually sells that so well, and yeah, I just think it was slightly off, but I'm sure she'll bring it back next season.
For sure. And then finally, kind of in our roundup, is there were also some big changes, big kind of pivotal moments for brands, which I think was to kind of be expected in this kind of huge point of change. As you said earlier, Burberry had a really big change, and it felt like a real synthesis between Riccardo and Burberry, possibly inspired by his time at home, and again, just having that break, having that time to really look back at where he'd been and where he was going. Yeah,
because I think, I mean, Riccardo was brought into Burberry to kind of redesign Burberry and kind of position. He's been working with the newish CEO, Marco Gabbetti, to kind of reposition Burberry as a luxury brand, and I think it's not an easy thing to deal with such house codes and heritage, and I think this season was such a turning point.
And also such a populist brand. A brand that has spoken to many different types of people for over 100 years, I believe. And for a long time. Don't quote me on that one. Christopher Kane, we already said, had really changed. You know, we weren't having these erotic fantasies anymore. It was really about, you know, just craft and having fun and escapism, which has always been there, but it wasn't based in these kind of almost comical fantasies, and you know, which I think was just nice to feel that change and feel that people were still taking this break to really address what was going on and then address how they wanted to incorporate that in their work. But the biggest change, I think, of the whole season and the best change was Art School, which was just brilliant.
Such an exciting moment. So Eden Loweth is their first season as sole creative director. And over the last 2 seasons, we've seen a slow move to sort of some kind of nurses' outfits, pinafores, moving towards a more kind of muted palette, away from kind of their origins and a lot of sequins and a lot of in-your-face kind of colour and texture. And this season, Eden really, you know, laid out, this is Eden's Art School. And it was a pre-filmed runway show, modelled by amazing cast of the art school community. The biggest collection that Eden's done, and they were saying that they needed to do this big collection to lay out this new vision.
No, and I think it was a ferocious show, and it was the right time for them to create that moment, especially as we don't know when the next London Fashion Week is going to be, sadly, or when we will all be able to join together. So I think kind of, well, it was a really apt time, and we'll see them through until we all meet again next time. Thank you for watching our London Roundup. We have lots of reviews on the SHOWstudio website, so be sure to check them out. And Milan Fashion Week starts tomorrow, so don't go anywhere. We'll be back very, very soon. Thanks for watching.